The fog rolled in like a mourner's veil, swallowing the gas lamps of Twilight Pier. Beneath the skeletal ribs of the old carousel, a woman lay, her emerald gown soaked crimson, a single pearl earring torn free. The tide hissed secrets against the pier's barnacled legs. No scream had broken the night, only the carousel's dying waltz, now silent. Hercule Poirot, arriving by the last ferry, adjusted his patent leather shoes on the slick boards. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, noting the absence of footprints in the blood. "A murder most intime and most impossible." Chapter 1. The Body on the Carousel. The fog did not merely drift in from the channel that night. It invaded, thick as wet wool, muffling the gas lamps until each glowed like a dying ember, behind a shroud. Twilight Pier, that relic of Victorian excess, stretched into the darkness like a skeletal finger accusing the sea. Its iron bones creaked beneath the weight of decades, and the carousel at its heart, once the pride of seaside holidaymakers, stood silent, its painted horses frozen in mid-gallop, their glass eyes reflecting nothing but the void. Hercule Poirot stepped from the last ferry with the precision of a man who disliked both haste and untidiness. His patent leather shoes found purchase on the slick boards despite the damp, and he adjusted the angle of his Homburg with a gloved finger. The constable waiting at the gangway was young, pale, and clearly out of his depth. "Monsieur Poirot," the boy stammered, "Inspector Japp sent for you special. Said it was, well, he said it was impossible." "Impossible," Poirot repeated, savouring the word like a particularly fine cognac. "A word much abused by the English police. Lead on, mon ami." They moved through the fog, past the shuttered kiosks that once sold cockles and kisses-me-quick hats, past the ghost of laughter that lingered in the salt air. The carousel emerged gradually, its canopy sagging like a funeral pall. Beneath it, illuminated by the constable's bullseye lantern, lay the body. Dr. Evelyn Harrow had been beautiful in life. Society pages testified to that. But death had arranged her features into something both tragic and theatrical. She lay on her back across the carousel platform, one arm flung wide as if reaching for an invisible partner, the other curled protectively across her throat. Her emerald silk gown, the colour of absinthe, had soaked up blood until it appeared black in the lantern light. The wound itself was a savage crescent, ear to ear, yet the blood had not sprayed. It had pooled beneath her with an almost artistic symmetry. Poirot knelt, his movements economical. "No arterial spray," he murmured. The carotid was severed, yet the heart had already ceased its labour. She was dead before the blade completed its work. Captain Hastings, who had followed at a distance, made a strangled sound. "Good Lord, Poirot, she looks arranged." "Precisely." Poirot's eyes, bright as a stoat's, moved across the scene. "Observe, her hair remains perfectly coiffed. The pearl earring, see how it dangles from the left lobe, yet its mate is missing. Torn away in passion, perhaps. Yet there is no corresponding damage to the gown's neckline." The constable shifted uncomfortably. "The pier was locked at midnight, sir. Chain across the entrance, padlock intact. Only 4 people had keys." Poirot rose, brushing imaginary dust from his trousers. 4 keys, 4 suspects. But first... He moved to the carousel's control mechanism, a brass lever partially concealed beneath faded velvet. "The platform rotates still. Feel the tension in the spring. Someone wound this machine not 2 hours ago." Hastings tested the lever. Heavy work. Would take strength. "Or desperation," Poirot corrected. He produced his pocket lens and examined the gears. Oil, fresh, And here? His gloved finger indicated a strand of golden thread caught in the mechanism. From Madame Vale's shawl, perhaps. She favours such dramatic touches. They circled the body slowly. The carousel horses watched with painted indifference. A white charger with a chipped ear, a black stallion missing its tail, a dappled mare whose saddle had been mended with fishing line. Evelyn lay between the mare and a swan boat meant for children, her blood staining the swan's carved feathers. No footprints in the blood, Hastings noted, not even hers. Indeed, she was placed here after death. But regardez, Poirot pointed to the platform's edge, where a single set of prints led away toward the pier's railing. Small feet, a woman's, yet they begin here, where the blood is thickest, and walk through it without hesitation. Curious, the constable cleared his throat. The tide, sir, comes right up under the pier at high water, washes everything clean. Poirot's moustache bristled. Then we must work quickly. The sea is a most efficient accomplice. He returned to the body, his examination methodical. Evelyn's right hand clutched something. A scrap of paper, crumpled but not blood-stained. With infinite care, he pried her fingers apart. The paper bore a single line in violet ink. "Meet me at the carousel. Midnight, come alone." No signature, Hastings observed, but the handwriting, elegant, educated. The paper is heavy, expensive. From the Pier Hotel stationery, I think. Poirot sniffed delicately. And beneath the blood, her perfume. L'heure bleue, Guerlain. Only the wealthy can afford such extravagance. He moved to her throat wound, his lens hovering inches away. The cut is deep but not clean. Serrated blade, garden shears perhaps, or a fishing knife. Yet the angle? He positioned himself behind the body, miming the strike. From behind, yes, but the killer was shorter than Madame Harrow. She was, 5'8" in her heels? The blade entered here at the base of the skull and was drawn across. A right-handed killer would need to reach up. Hastings measured with his eyes. Most of our suspects are taller. Most, Poirot agreed, but not all. The fog chose that moment to part slightly, revealing the pier's full length. At the far end, the funhouse mirrors caught the lantern light and threw it back in fractured pieces. For an instant, Poirot thought he saw movement. A figure in emerald silk standing where no figure could stand. Then the fog closed again. "Did you see?" Hastings began. "I saw," Poirot said quietly. "The dead do not walk, mon ami, but sometimes the living impersonate them." He stood, his mind racing through possibilities like cards in a shuffled deck. The locked pier, the 4 keys, the wound that should have sprayed but did not, the missing earring, the fresh oil on ancient gears, the footprints that began in blood. "Constable," he said briskly, "I require the complete list of key holders, their alibis, and access to the Pier Hotel's guest registry. Also, send for Dr. Whitmore, Madame Harrow's personal physician. He will confirm time of death." As the constable hurried away, Poirot turned back to the carousel. The painted horses seemed to watch him with new interest. He addressed them softly in French. "You have seen everything, mes amis. The murder, the arrangement of the body, perhaps even the killer's face reflected in your glass eyes. But you will not speak, not yet." Hastings shivered. "Dash it, Poirot. You're giving me the willies. Good. Fear sharpens the mind." Poirot's gaze fell upon something half-hidden beneath the swan's wing. A child's marble, its surface swirled with green and gold. He picked it up carefully. Cat's eye, expensive. Not the sort of toy left lying about. "Could belong to anyone," Hastings said. "Or to someone who was here when they should not have been." Poirot pocketed the marble. "Come, We must examine the point of entry. They followed the blood-free footprints to the pier's edge. Here the boards were warped and rotten, dangerous even in daylight. The prints ended at a railing where a section of chain had been recently cut, the links bright where the bolt cutters had bitten through. "Someone came by boat," Hastings said. "Small craft could tie up beneath the pier." "Possible, but then why cut the chain? Unless—" Poirot leaned over the railing, his lantern revealing barnacles encrusted on the pilings below. One cluster had been scraped raw, the wound fresh and bleeding pale green sap. Here, the height, approximately 5'6" from the waterline at high tide. Someone climbed up, using the barnacles for purchase. Hastings measured against his own height. That's precise. Precision is the murderer's signature. Poirot straightened. They knew exactly where to climb, exactly how to avoid leaving traces in the blood. This was planned, mon ami. Planned with the care of a surgeon, or the desperation of a madman. The carousel behind them gave a sudden, mechanical groan. Both men spun as the platform began to turn, slowly at first, then with gathering speed. They hissed. Painted horses rose and fell in their endless dance, Evelyn's body sliding gently with the motion until she came to rest against the dappled mare's foreleg. "Who?" Hastings started toward the control lever, but Poirot caught his arm. "Wait, observe." The carousel completed one full revolution, the swan's wing passing inches from Poirot's face. As it did, something glinted in the lantern light, a second pearl earring, caught in the swan's carved feathers. Poirot plucked it free with his handkerchief. "The mate," he said softly, "placed here deliberately. But why?" The platform slowed, then stopped with a final shudder. In the silence that followed, a new sound emerged, the rhythmic creak of ropes against wood. From beneath the pier came the gentle slap of water against a hull. "Someone is still here," Hastings whispered. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Then let us greet them." They moved to the edge where the cut chain dangled. Below, tied to a piling with nautical precision, rocked a small dinghy. Its oars were shipped, its painter new. In the bottom lay a woman's kid glove, stained dark at the fingers. "Blood?" Hastings asked. "Oil," Poirot corrected, lifting the glove to his nose. "The same oil that lubricates the carousel gears." Our killer prepared their escape with care. He was about to descend when the constable returned, breathless. "Sir, the key holders, they're all at the hotel. Inspector Japp's rounding them up. But there's something else. The night watchman, he swears he heard music, the carousel waltz, playing at 20 minutes past midnight." Poirot's moustache twitched. 20 minutes after the pier was locked. Most interesting. As they turned back toward the carousel, the fog parted once more. This time the vision was clearer. A woman in emerald silk, standing at the funhouse entrance. She raised one hand in greeting, then stepped backward into the darkness. The door swung shut behind her with a sound like laughter. Hastings started forward, but Poirot restrained him. "No, mon ami, that is bait, not prey. Our killer wishes us to follow into the maze of mirrors. There, all cats are grey. Then what do? We do what the killer least expects." Poirot's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "We wait, we watch, and we use these." He tapped his temple. "The little grey cells. They require only facts, not fog." The carousel horses watched them with painted wisdom. Somewhere in the distance, a buoy bell tolled 3 times. The tide was turning, and with it, the shape of the mystery began to reveal itself. Not in grand gestures, but in the smallest details. A missing earring, a child's marble, a glove stained with oil, footprints that began where they should have ended. Poirot stood motionless, his mind racing through the possibilities. 4 keys, 4 suspects, 1 body, perfectly arranged. And somewhere in the fog, a killer who believed themselves invisible. But Hercule Poirot had made a career of seeing the invisible. And tonight, on Twilight Pier, the game had well and truly begun. The fog closed in again, thicker than before, but Poirot smiled into its embrace. Let the killer play their tricks with mirrors and music. Let them believe the locked pier protected them. The truth, like the tide, always returned, and Hercule Poirot was nothing if not patient. Chapter 2. The 4 Keys. Poirot disliked hotels the way a cat dislikes water, tolerable only when necessary, and then with visible distaste. The Pier Hotel, however, was a monument to faded grandeur. Chandeliers that had once dazzled now flickered with weak bulbs, and the carpet's pattern had been worn into ghostly trails by generations of holiday feet. The constable led them through the lobby to a private parlour where Inspector Japp waited, his bulldog face set in lines of professional gloom. "Poirot," Japp greeted, waving a meaty hand. "Thought you'd be on the Riviera chasing heiresses, not mucking about with us provincials. Your summons was most urgent, mon ami, and the English seaside in November has a certain piquancy." Poirot's gaze swept the room. 4 people sat in attitudes of forced composure, each occupying a separate island of furniture as though contamination were possible through proximity alone. Japp cleared his throat. "The key holders. Captain Reginald Thorne, ex-Navy, engaged to the deceased until she broke it off last month. Madame Lysandre Vale, spiritualist, claims the victim owed her 10,000 for services rendered. Silas Crowe, pier mechanic, sacked by Miss Harrow 3 weeks ago. Dr. Marcus Whitmore, her personal physician." Poirot inclined his head with exquisite politeness. "Enchanté. We shall begin with the keys themselves, Tra." He produced 4 brass keys from his pocket, each tagged with a constable's evidence label, and laid them on the green baize card table like a conjurer revealing his cards. They were identical save for minute differences. One slightly bent, another scratched along the shaft, a third polished to a high sheen, the 4th tarnished with verdigris. "Observe," Poirot said, addressing the room. 4 keys to a single lock, yet the padlock on the pier gate shows fresh scoring here and here. He indicated microscopic nicks visible only through his lens. Made by a key forced at an angle. Someone was in haste, or someone was not familiar with the mechanism. Captain Thorne shifted in his chair, his left hand trembling with the old shrapnel wound that had ended his naval career. "I haven't touched that gate in months. Evelyn, Miss Harrow, changed the lock after she dismissed Crowe. Said she didn't trust the staff." "Yet you retained your key," Poirot noted mildly. "Sentimental value," Thorne muttered. "She gave it to me the night we became engaged, on this very pier." Madame Vale, swathed in layers of purple silk that would have embarrassed a bishop, gave a theatrical shudder. "The spirits are restless. I felt a great disturbance at midnight, cold as the grave." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Madam, your shawl, golden threads. I found one identical in the carousel gears. You were on the pier. Impossible!" Vale's rings flashed as she gestured. "I was conducting a séance for Lady Ashford until 3 in the morning. Her butler will confirm." Silas Crowe leaned forward, his mechanic's hands blackened despite scrubbing. "I was home, asleep. My landlady heard me snoring, and I wouldn't kill Miss High and Mighty, not when I'm suing her for wrongful dismissal." Dr. Whitmore, elegant in a charcoal suit that spoke of Harley Street rather than seaside practice, removed his spectacles and polished them with a silk handkerchief. I was in surgery until 1. Appendectomy on young Master Grayson. Nurse Grady assisted. The child nearly didn't make it." Poirot's gaze lingered on Whitmore's hands. Steady, surgeon's hands. "Yet you prescribed Miss Harrow laudanum for her nerves. A generous dosage, I see, from the pharmacy records." Whitmore's jaw tightened. "She suffered insomnia. Perfectly standard." "Standard?" Poirot repeated. "Like the theatre ticket stub in your waste bin. The mousetrap, 11 o'clock performance. Nurse Grady was seen leaving the theatre with a gentleman at interval. You, perhaps?" The room stilled. Whitmore's composure cracked like thin ice. A harmless flirtation. Evelyn knew. She encouraged it. Encouraged? Poirot's voice could cut glass. Or blackmailed. The letter in her reticule. M. You promised. Initials are so convenient, n'est-ce pas? Hastings, who had been examining the keys under Poirot's direction, gave a small exclamation. "This one, Crow's, I think, has a trace of green paint on the bow. Matches the carousel exactly." Crow surged to his feet. "Planted! She framed me once. Why not twice?" "Sit down, Mr. Crow," Jap growled. "You'll have your say." Poirot ignored the interruption. "Let us reconstruct the timeline. The pier locks at midnight. The carousel was wound at 11:47. Precise, because the spring tension tells us so. The murder occurs between 11:50 and 12:15, judging by blood coagulation and the tide's erasure of footprints. Yet the night watchman heard music at 12:20, after the lockup." He turned to Thorne. "Captain, your naval training included knotwork. The dinghy beneath the pier was tied with a perfect bowline. Your signature knot, no?" Thorne's face drained of colour. "Anyone could learn that." "Anyone," Poirot agreed, "but not anyone would know the exact tide times to climb the pilings without being swept away. You kept your charts, Capitaine. I saw them in your room, annotated in red ink." Madame Vale clutched her crystal pendant. "The spirits show me a woman in green, spinning. Enough of your spirits," Jap snapped. "Poirot, what about the wound? Doctor?" Whitmore recovered his poise. Serrated blade, drawn from left to right. Killer stood behind her, slightly shorter, right-handed. "Yet the barnacle scrape," Poirot said softly, "is at 5'6". Madame Vale is 5'2". Captain Thorne, 6 foot. Mr. Crow, 5'8". Doctor, you are precisely 5'6". The accusation hung in the air like cigar smoke. Whitmore smiled thinly. "Coincidence, and I was in surgery." Poirot produced the pearl earring from his pocket, the one found in the swan's feathers. This was placed deliberately after death, but its pair was torn free during life. See the broken clasp. Someone wanted us to find this one. A message, perhaps. He moved to the window overlooking the pier. Dawn was breaking, turning the fog opal. The carousel spins still. Someone returns to the scene, not to gloat, but to retrieve something left behind. Hastings followed his gaze. The mirror maze. That's where the footprints led. Précisément. Poirot turned back to the suspects. "One of you knows what was hidden there. One of you fears its discovery more than arrest." Madame Vale's hand flew to her throat. "The crystal! It clouds when lies are spoken." Poirot's smile was winter. "Then let us test its clarity. Dr. Whitmore, your surgery records, may we examine them?" Whitmore hesitated a fraction too long. "Of course, though I fail to see—" "Because," Poirot interrupted, "the appendectomy was scheduled for tomorrow. Young Grayson is at this moment eating kippers in the dining room. I checked." The room erupted. Thorne lunged at Whitmore. Crow shouted accusations. Vale began a low keening. Jap's constables moved in. But Poirot raised a hand. "Attendes. The doctor lies, yes, but he did not kill. Observe his hands. No tremor when he polished his glasses. Yet earlier they shook. Guilt, not dexterity. And the wound required strength he does not possess in his left arm. Old tennis injury, known?" Whitmore slumped, defeated. She was going to expose the affair, ruin me. But I swear, later, Poirot said. He picked up the bent key, Thorns. This one opened the padlock tonight. The scoring matches. But the captain could not have wound the carousel. His wound prevents sustained cranking. He turned to Crow. "You, monsieur, have oil on your cuffs identical to the carousel gears, but your boots, size 10, do not match the footprints, size 7. Madame Vale began to rise, but Poirot's gaze pinned her. "You, madame, left your shawl thread as a signature. But you are too short, and your séance ended at 11. Lady Ashford is deaf, she retired early." Silence fell, thick as the fog outside. Poirot's voice was soft. "The fourth key, Dr. Whitmore's, polished clean because it was never used. Someone else entirely held the duplicate." He moved to the door. "Come, the mirror maze awaits, and with it, the truth." As they filed out, the suspects exchanging fearful glances, Poirot paused beside the card table. The 4 keys lay in a perfect square. But now, in the centre, someone had placed a child's marble, green and gold, identical to the one found beneath the swan. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The game had taken an unexpected turn, and the player who moved the marble was still among them, watching, waiting, certain their deception was complete. But Hercule Poirot never lost at cards, and this hand was far from over. Chapter 3. The Waltz of Lies. The Pier Hotel's séance parlour had been commandeered as an interrogation room, but it still reeked of patchouli and desperation. Velvet drapes the colour of dried blood swallowed the gaslight. A round table draped in black lace stood centre stage like an altar to mendacity. Madame Lysandra Vale sat beneath a crystal chandelier that trembled whenever the wind rattled the windows, her rings clinking against a crystal ball the size of a baby's skull. Poirot entered without ceremony, Hastings at his heel like a well-trained spaniel. Inspector Japp brought up the rear, arms folded, jaw working a piece of gum, as though it had personally offended him. "Madame," Poirot began, voice smooth as creme brulee, "you will forgive the intrusion, but the spirits are most uncooperative tonight. They refuse to speak, unless, of course, you compel them." Vale's kohl-rimmed eyes narrowed. "The veil is thin at dawn. Ask your questions, little man, but do not mock what you cannot comprehend." Poirot inclined his head. "The picture of humility, naturellement. Let us begin with the veil you yourself wore last evening." He produced the strand of golden thread caught in the carousel gears, holding it to the light between tweezers. "Lurex, imported from Paris. Only one shawl in this town matches yours. It left its signature in the machine that spun a dead woman." Vale's fingers fluttered to the fringe at her throat. "A gift from a client. I lent it to Evelyn, Miss Harrow, weeks ago. She admired the colour. Yet it was wound into the gears at 11:47, Poirot said. The spring tension is precise. Someone wearing your shawl operated the mechanism after the pier was locked." Hastings leaned in. "And your séance for Lady Ashford ended rather abruptly, didn't it? The butler says her ladyship was asleep by 10:30, deaf as a post and snoring like a foghorn." Vale's composure cracked like cheap porcelain. "I remained to cleanse the room. Negative energies that required you to visit the pier." Poirot circled the table, his reflection multiplying in the crystal ball. "You owed Miss Harrow £10,000. Spiritual advice is expensive, n'est-ce pas? She threatened exposure. Your channeling of the late Lord Ashford was remarkably accurate, considering he died in Monte Carlo with a chorus girl, not whispering stock tips from beyond the veil. The chandelier gave a nervous shiver. Somewhere in the corridor, a clock struck 6, each chime a small hammer against the suspect's nerves. Nay, Captain Thorne burst through the door, uninvited, brandy fumes preceding him like a vanguard. His left hand, the shrapnel-scarred one, trembled so violently that the decanter on the sideboard rattled in sympathy. "Enough of this witch's prattle," he roared. "I loved Evelyn. She promised marriage, then laughed when my last ship foundered on her father's reef of bad investments. I'd have killed myself before touching a hair on her head." Poirot regarded him with clinical interest. "Yet you kept your key, Capitaine, and your charts show the exact tide that would allow a dinghy to tie beneath the pier without grounding. The bowline knot, textbook Royal Navy." Thorne's face purpled. "I was drunk in my room. Ask the barman." "The barman," Poirot said gently, "closed at 11. You signed for a bottle of Armagnac at 11:15, then vanished until 2. Plenty of time to row across the bay, wind a carousel, and return." Silas Crowe slouched in next, cap in hand, oil still ground into the creases of his knuckles. "If we're confessing movements, I was fixing the ghost train till midnight. Kids jammed the tracks with toffee apples again. Ask the ticket girl." Poirot's moustache twitched. "The ghost train, adjacent to the carousel. You could see the platform from the maintenance hatch. And your toolkit, monsieur, contained a bloodied scalpel." Crowe spat on the carpet. "Planted, same as the coins she framed me with." "That scalpel's surgical. My blades are serrated for cable. Check the wound." Dr. Whitmore entered last, impeccable as always, though a faint bruise of sleeplessness shadowed his eyes. He carried a leather medical bag like a shield. "The wound," he said, anticipating the question, "was made by a heavy jagged blade, garden shears perhaps, or a gutting knife, drawn left to right by a right-handed assailant standing behind and slightly below the victim. Death instantaneous, yet the heart had already stopped. Post-mortem mutilation to confuse time of death." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Précisément. Which brings us to the laudanum. You prescribed Miss Harrow 2 grains nightly. Her blood shows 4, enough to render her unconscious but not dead. Someone administered an overdose, then staged the throat slashing." Whitmore set the bag down with deliberate care. "I was in surgery. Scheduled for tomorrow," Poirot finished. "Young Grayson is at this moment demolishing kippers. Your theatre alibi collapses like a house of cards." The room temperature seemed to drop. Madame Val began a low humming. Some invocation, perhaps, or simply nerves. The crystal ball clouded as though breath had been blown across it. Poirot moved to the phonograph in the corner, an ornate Victrola with a horn like a morning glory. The night watchman heard music at 12:20. This machine, he lifted the lid, plays a single 78 RPM record. Val's Blue, Miss Harrow's favourite. The needle is worn in the exact groove that would sound 20 minutes into the side. He placed the needle. The waltz began, tinny and mournful, filling the parlour with ghosts. As the melody swelled, Poirot watched their faces. Thorne's guilt, Vale's calculation, Crowe's sullen rage, Whitmore's clinical detachment. Someone returned to the pier, Poirot said over the music, not to kill, but to listen, to ensure the timing was perfect. The carousel spun, the body arranged, the music played, tableau. But one detail escaped. He stopped the record abruptly. Silence crashed down. The pearl earring in the swan's feathers, He continued. Placed after the carousel began its final turn. The killer wanted us to find it, wanted us to believe the murder occurred during the spin. Yet the blood on the platform was already congealed. The earring was planted after death, after the music. Hastings frowned. Then the killer came back? No, the killer never left. Poirot's gaze swept the room. One of you was on the pier the entire time, hiding in the mirror maze, watching us discover the body, moving the marble, planting the earring. The fog was your ally. Madame Vale's humming ceased. The mirrors, they lie. I saw two Evelyns in the crystal, identical, yet one wept blood. Poirot's voice softened to a dangerous purr. Twins, perhaps? But no, Miss Harrow had no sister, or did she? He produced a photograph from his pocket, yellowed with age, two little girls in sailor dresses, arms around each other, identical down to the gap-toothed smiles. On the back, in faded ink, Evelyn and Isabel, 1908. The room held its breath. Isabel, Poirot said, committed to Bedlam in 1922 after attempting to drown her sister in the bath. Escaped last month. Height 5'6", left-handed. Garden shears were her preferred weapon. Stole them from the asylum greenhouse. Thorne laughed, a cracked sound. You're saying a lunatic twin did this? I am saying, Poirot corrected, that someone in this room knew Isabel was free. Someone brought her here. Someone used her as a weapon. He turned to Whitmore. You treated Isabel at Bedlam, n'est-ce pas? Your signature is on her release papers. Forged, of course. Evelyn discovered the affair and the escape. She threatened to expose you both. Whitmore's hand went to his throat. She was going to ruin me, so you ruined her first, Poirot finished. But you needed a scapegoat. Isabel, drugged and desperate, was perfect. You gave her the laudanum, the shears, the key. You wound the carousel yourself. Your left arm may be weak, but the crank requires only downward pressure. The waltz, record, forgotten, began to skip. Da-da-da-da, endlessly. Vale screamed, a high theatrical note that shattered a wineglass on the sideboard. Poirot raised a hand. Attendes, the doctor is guilty, of conspiracy, yes, but not of the final cut. Observe. He lifted Whitmore's right hand, turning it palm up. A fresh blister crossed the lifeline. From the carousel crank, yet the crank was wound at 11:47. Your surgery alibi, though false, places you at the theatre until 11:30. You could not be in two places. Whitmore stared at the blister as though it belonged to someone else. Then who? Hastings began. Poirot's gaze fixed on Madame Vale. You, Madame, left the séance at 11:15. You met Isabel at the pier, gave her the overdose, the shears. But you are 5'2". The barnacle scrape is 5'6". You stood on something. He pointed to the black lace tablecloth. Beneath it, a wooden crate, painted gold, stenciled property of Madame Vale. Fragile. Your spirit cabinet, Poirot said, used for materializations. You stood upon it to reach Evelyn's throat, then kicked it into the sea. But the tide returned it. He produced a sodden label, still legible. Vale. Vale lunged for the crystal ball, hurling it at Poirot's head. He ducked. It shattered against the wall in a rainbow of shards. Japp's constables moved in. As Vale was handcuffed, her makeup ran in black rivulets. She promised me the money, then laughed, said the spirits were fake, that I was a fraud. Poirot retrieved a shard of crystal. In it, he saw not Vale's reflection, but his own, multiplied infinitely, each Poirot holding a different clue. The waltz of lies ends, he said softly, but the music plays on. For Isabel is still out there, drugged, armed, and believing herself the avenger. From the pier came a sound. The carousel, starting up again, its waltz echoing across the water like a lullaby for the damned. Poirot turned to the window. In the dawn light, a figure in emerald silk stood at the funhouse entrance, beckoning. The real killer was ready for the final dance. Chapter 4. The Tide's Confession. Dawn bled across the water, turning fog to mother of pearl. Twilight Pier lay stripped of illusion. The carousel a silent scaffold, the funhouse mirrors blind with salt. Poirot stood where Evelyn had fallen, the boards beneath his feet still tacky with blood the tide had failed to claim. Hastings shivered in his overcoat. "The sea's rising again. Another hour and every trace will be gone." "Then we must speak louder than the sea," Poirot replied. He knelt, gloved fingers tracing the barnacle scrape on the piling. 5'6" from high water mark. The killer climbed here, stood here, struck here. He mimed the arc of the blade. Left-handed, remember. The cut begins high on the right, ends low on the left. A constable approached, boots squelching. "Sir, the dinghy's been hauled up. No name, no papers, just this." He held out a sodden kid glove, dark at the fingertips. Poirot sniffed. Machine oil, not blood, the same oil that lubricates the carousel. He turned the glove inside out. Stitched into the lining, in violet silk, were the initials I.H. Isabel Harrow, Hastings breathed. Précisément. Poirot pocketed the glove, but Isabel did not row herself here. Someone launched the boat, tied the bowline, helped her aboard. Someone with nautical skill. He moved to the carousel platform. The painted horses stared with chipped dignity. Between the dappled mare and the swan boat, the blood had formed a perfect oval. No splatter, no drag marks. "She was killed elsewhere," Poirot announced. "Carried here, arranged like a tableau. The throat wound is camouflage. The real cause of death is elsewhere." He lifted Evelyn's rigid arm. Lividity fixed on the back. She lay face down for at least 2 hours before being moved. Hastings measured the distance to the piling. From the climb to here, 20 feet. Carrying a body that weight, in the dark, over wet boards. Impossible for Madame Vale. She is 5'2" and weighs perhaps 8 stone. Dr. Whitmore's left arm is weak. Captain Thorne's tremor would betray him. That leaves Silas Crow. They found Crow in the ghost train shed, stripping rust from a skeleton's jaw. His boots, size 10, left prints in the oil-stained sawdust. "Mr. Crow," Poirot said, "you hated Miss Harrow. She framed you, cost you your livelihood. Yet you are strong enough to carry a body, familiar enough with the pier to navigate blind." Crow didn't look up. "I was here all night. Ticket girl saw me till 1. "The ticket girl," Poirot said gently, "is your niece. She would lie for family." Crow's wrench clattered. "Check the wound. My knife is serrated, yes, but the blade's 12 inches. That cut was made with something shorter, heavier, garden shears." Poirot produced the sodden crate label. "Property of Madame Vale. Fragile." Madame stood on this to reach Evelyn's throat. "But the overdose, the laudanum, that was your province, n'est-ce pas? You kept a bottle in your locker for back pain. The dosage matches." Crow's shoulders sagged. "She came to me at 11, begging for something to help Evelyn sleep. Said her sister was poorly. I thought she meant nerves." "Isabel," Poirot corrected, "you gave the drug to the wrong sister." They left Crow in Japp's custody and returned to the platform. Poirot knelt again, this time at the swanboat. Beneath the carved wing, something glinted. A tiny brass key no longer than a matchstick. "The music box key," Hastings said, "from the carousel's heart." Poirot wound it. A single phrase of Valse Bleu tinkled out, then stopped. The mechanism was tampered with. Someone wanted the music to play after death to confuse the timeline. He stood, eyes sweeping the pier. The killer needed 3 things: access, strength, and silence. Madame Vale provided access and the crate. Crow provided the drug and the oil, but the carrying, the climbing, the final arrangement. His gaze fell on the funhouse. The door stood ajar, a slice of darkness beckoning. Inside, the mirrors were cracked, silver backing flaking like dead skin. Poirot moved slowly, lantern raised. In one shard he saw himself. In another, Hastings. In a third, a woman in emerald silk standing behind him. He did not turn. "Bonjour, Isabelle," the reflection smiled. "You're clever, little man. Evelyn always said Belgians were tenacious." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Hastings spun, revolver drawn. "Put it away, Captain," Poirot murmured. "She is not armed. She is finished." A section of mirror swung open, a false panel. Isabel Harrow stepped through, identical to her sister, but for the eyes. One green, one milky with cataract. In her left hand she held garden shears, blades dark with old blood. "She stole my life," Isabel whispered. "Locked me away. I only took it back." Poirot's voice was gentle. "You climbed the piling. You carried her here. You arranged her like a doll. But you left the glove. You left the key. You left yourself." Isabel's hand trembled. "They'll lock me up again." "No, they will hang you, unless—" Poirot stepped closer. "Tell me who helped you launch the boat. Who tied the bowline?" For a moment, the funhouse was silent, but for the sea's distant roar. Then Isabel laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Find the tide's confession yourself, monsieur. It's written in blood and barnacles." She lunged, shears raised. Hastings fired once. The mirror behind her shattered into 1,000 Isabels, all falling. When the echo died, Poirot knelt beside the body. In Isabel's pocket, a child's marble green and gold and a theatre ticket stub, the Mousetrap 11 p.m., seat A13, the same seat Dr. Whitmore claimed. Poirot closed her eyes. "The waltz is over," he said softly, "but the orchestra plays on." Outside, the carousel began to turn again, unmanned, unprompted, its painted horses rising and falling to a melody only the dead could hear. Chapter 5. The Doctor's Scalpel. The pier hotel surgery had been converted into a makeshift morgue. A single gas lamp hissed above the steel table where Evelyn Harrow lay. Sheet drawn to her chin, the savage crescent of her throat hidden but not forgotten. Dr. Marcus Whitmore stood at the foot, coat unbuttoned, hands clasped behind his back like a lecturer before a cadaver. Poirot entered without ceremony, Hastings trailing. Inspector Japp barred the door. "Doctor," Poirot said, voice clipped, "you will examine the wound again, in front of witnesses." Whitmore's eyebrow arched. "I've already—" "Again." Poirot's eyes were winter, steel. With a sigh, Whitmore peeled back the sheet. The gash gaped dark and ugly. He took a probe, measured. 8 inches, serrated, left to right, post-mortem. Heart ceased prior. "Cause?" Poirot pressed. "Laudanum. 4 grains, perhaps 5. Lethal in her state." Whitmore's voice was clinical, but his left hand, the weak one, curled into a fist. Poirot produced the sodden glove from his pocket. "Found in the dinghy. Initials IH. Yet the oil inside matches your surgery stores. Explain." Whitmore did not flinch. "Isabel was my patient at Bedlam. I treated her for hysteria. She stole supplies when she escaped. Convenient." Poirot laid the tiny brass music box key beside the body. "This was in the carousel's heart. Wound to play Valse Bleue at 12:20. You claimed to be at the Mousetrap until 11:30. Seat A13. Yet Isabel had the stub for the same seat, in her pocket when she died." Whitmore's composure cracked. I gave her the ticket. To keep her quiet. She was blackmailing me. About the affair? Hastings asked. About everything. Whitmore's voice dropped. Evelyn discovered I'd forged Isabel's release. She threatened to ruin me, my practice, my marriage. I thought if Isabel disappeared, you armed a mad woman, Poirot said softly. Gave her laudanum, shears, a key, but you did not reckon on her strength or her hatred. Whitmore sank onto a stool. I watched from the funhouse. I saw her carry Evelyn like a child. I wound the carousel myself. My left arm is weak, but the crank only needs one good pull. I thought the music would confuse the timeline. Poirot circled the table. Yet you returned at dawn. To retrieve the second earring. To move the marble. To watch us dance to your tune. I had to know if she'd left evidence. Whitmore's eyes were hollow. I found the glove in the boat. I should have burned it. Japp stepped forward, cuffs ready. Marcus Whitmore, I'm arresting you for attendez. Poirot raised a hand. The doctor is guilty of conspiracy, of cowardice, of monstrous arrogance, but not of the final cut. He lifted Evelyn's right hand. Beneath the nail of the index finger, a flake of gold paint flecked with green. From the carousel, Hastings said. No, from the ghost train shed, where Silas Crowe works. Poirot turned to Whitmore. You gave Isabel the drug, the key, the ticket, but Crowe gave her the strength. He carried the body. He climbed the piling. His boots are size 10, but he wore Evelyn's shoes, size 7, to leave the prints. Whitmore stared. Crowe hated her, yes, but Crowe loved her, Poirot corrected, in his rough way. She promised him the pier if he helped remove Isabel. He thought he was saving her. Instead, he enabled the monster. He produced the child's marble from his pocket, the one found beneath the swan, now joined by its twin from Isabel's grasp. Crowe carved these for Evelyn when they were children. She kept one. Isabel stole the other from Bedlam. A matched pair, like the sisters. Hastings whistled. So Crowe launched the dinghy, tied the bowline, and stood on Madame Vale's crate to reach the throat, Poirot finished. Vale provided the stage, Whitmore the poison, Crowe the muscle. Isabel was the blade. Whitmore buried his face in his hands. I thought I could control her. You controlled nothing, Poirot said. You merely opened the cage. He turned to the sheeted figure. Evelyn Harrow was not the victim of one mind, but of 4. Greed, madness, love, fear. Each took a turn at the wheel. Japp cuffed Whitmore. You'll hang for this, Doctor. Whitmore laughed, a broken sound. Better the rope than her eyes. They follow me still. As they led him away, Poirot lingered. He adjusted the sheet over Evelyn's face with gentle precision. The waltz is silent now, he murmured, but the pier remembers every step. Outside, the carousel gave one final creak, then stilled. The painted horses lowered their heads as if in mourning. The tide rolled in, gentle and relentless, washing the last of the blood into the sea. Poirot closed the surgery door. Behind him, the lamp flickered once, then died. Chapter 6. The Recorded Betrayal. The Pier Hotel's private study smelled of pipe smoke and panic. A reel-to-reel tape recorder, borrowed from the local wireless station, sat on the mahogany desk like a black insect. Inspector Japp threaded the spool with thick fingers, his face grim. Poirot stood by the window, watching gulls wheel over a sea turned gunmetal by noon light. Hastings guarded the door. The suspects waited in the corridor, each under constable's watch. Japp pressed play. A hiss, then Evelyn Harrow's voice, slurred, intimate, venomous. You promised to leave your wife, Marcus, after the inheritance, you said, but the will's changed, hasn't it? Isabel gets everything if I die first. Whitmore's recorded reply was muffled, urgent. Keep your voice down. She's in the next room, drugged. Evelyn laughed, the sound brittle. 4 grains, like you taught me. She'll sleep till Judgment Day. Now pay me, or I tell the world you forged her release. The tape crackled. A door creaked. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate. Then a woman's scream cut short. Silence. 30 seconds of nothing but tape hiss. Then the scream again, fainter, as if from a distance. Japp stopped the machine. Found this inside the hollow leg of the carousel's dappled mare. Wired to the music box, played when the platform turned. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Mon Dieu! The murder recorded itself, but listen! The gap! 30 seconds. Someone stopped the tape, moved the microphone, restarted it. He rewound, played the gap at half speed. Beneath the hiss, a soft click, then breathing, close, controlled, a man's breathing. Whitmore? Hastings asked. Non. Poirot shook his head. The doctor's lungs are weak, asthma. This is deeper, stronger. He turned to Japp. Bring Crow. Silas Crow entered, cap in hand, oil still ground into his knuckles. His eyes flicked to the recorder as if it might bite. Mr. Crow, Poirot said, you carved the marbles for Evelyn when you were children. You kept one, she kept the other. Isabel stole hers from Bedlam. Yet both marbles were on the pier last night. Explain. Crow's jaw worked. I went to warn her. Evelyn said Isabel was coming. Said she'd handle it. I didn't believe her. You launched the dinghy, Poirot pressed. Tied the bowline, carried the body. Stood on Madame Vale's crate to reach the throat. But the tape, you stopped it. Why? Crow's shoulders sagged. I heard them arguing, Evelyn laughing at the doctor. I thought if I recorded it, I'd have proof, leverage to get my job back. I hid the microphone in the swan boat. When Isabel screamed, I panicked, stopped the tape, moved it closer, didn't want her voice on it. Poirot's voice was gentle. You loved Evelyn. You thought you were protecting her, but you enabled the monster. Crow's eyes filled. She promised me the pier, said we'd run it together. I didn't know Isabel was wrong. Japp cuffed him. Silas Crow, you're nicked for accessory to murder. As Crow was led away, Poirot rewound the tape again. This time he isolated the 30-second gap, amplified it. Beneath the breathing, a faint metallic scrape. Garden shears opening. Isabel was already armed, Hastings said. Crow didn't stop her. No. Poirot's face was grim, but someone guided her hand, someone who knew the exact moment to strike. He turned to the window. Below, the carousel stood silent, its painted horses frozen mid-gallop. Yet one horse, the black stallion, was missing its tail. In its place, a fresh gouge, as if something had been pried loose. Poirot descended to the pier, the others following. He knelt by the stallion, fingers tracing the gouge. Inside the hollow leg, a second reel-to-reel tape, smaller, labelled in violet ink, for HP. He carried it back to the study, threaded it with care. The machine whirred. Isabel's voice, calm, almost childlike. You said she'd sleep, Doctor. You said it would be quick, but she laughed at me. Said I was the spare, the broken one. So I took her voice, like she took mine. A pause, then Whitmore, frantic. Give me the shears, Isabel. It's done. No, the pier remembers. The horses see everything. The tape ended with the sound of the carousel starting up. Slow, deliberate, the waltz beginning anew. Poirot stopped the machine. The doctor did not strike the blow, but he stood by while madness did. He thought he could control her. He was wrong. Japp scratched his head. So who's the killer? Isabel's dead. Crow's confessed to helping. Vale's in a cell. Whitmore's broken. Poirot's gaze drifted to the window. The killer is the pier itself. It swallowed their secrets, spun their lies into music, and delivered them to us on silver tape, but one thread remains. He produced the child's marble, the one from Isabel's pocket. Inside the glass, a tiny bubble trapped forever. "Evelyn kept this in her locket," he said. "Isabel stole it the night she escaped. Crow returned it to the pier. 3 people, 1 marble. The 4th—" He turned the marble. Etched on the base, almost invisible, M.V. Madame Vale. Poirot's smile was thin. The spiritualist saw 2 Evelyns because she created 2. She forged the release papers. She drugged them both. She stood on her crate and guided Isabel's hand. The doctor was her puppet, Crow her muscle, the pier her stage. He pressed play on the first tape again. This time, beneath Evelyn's laughter, a woman's voice, low, amused. "Dance, puppets! The waltz is mine!" Madame Vale's voice. The room was silent but for the sea's distant roar. Outside, the carousel gave one final creak, then stilled forever. The painted horses lowered their heads as if in shame. Poirot closed the recorder. The orchestra falls silent. The curtain descends. But in the hush, a child's laughter echoed from the funhouse, high, mad, and free. Chapter 7. The Mechanic's Revenge. The ghost train shed stank of rust, coal oil, and despair. Overhead, a single bulb swung on its cord, throwing shadows that lurched like drunken ghouls across papier-mâché skeletons. Silas Crow sat on an upturned crate, wrists cuffed, staring at the floor as though it might open and swallow him whole. A constable stood guard. Jap loomed in the doorway. Hastings blocked the only other exit. Poirot entered last, closing the door with the soft finality of a coffin lid. "Mr. Crow," Poirot began, voice low, "you have confessed to launching the dinghy, tying the bowline, carrying the body. You have admitted giving laudanum to the wrong sister, but you have not told us why you returned at dawn. Why risk everything to move the marble, to plant the second tape?" Crow's shoulders heaved. "I wanted it finished. I thought if you found the tape, you'd blame the doctor. Let me walk away with my revenge." "Revenge," Poirot repeated, tasting the word. "Evelyn promised you the pier, then framed you for theft. You hated her, yet you carved marbles for her as a boy. You loved her still." Crow's laugh was a rasp. "Love? She laughed when they sacked me. Said I was replaceable, like a gear." He kicked the crate. It splintered. "I built this place with my hands, every bolt, every light. She wanted to turn it into a museum, charged toff 6pence to gawk at my work." Poirot knelt, eye level. "So you helped Isabel. You thought if Evelyn died, the pier would be yours." "I thought Isabel was the weapon," Crow whispered. "Didn't know she was the wound." He reached into his pocket, slowly, under the constable's gaze, and drew out a folded paper, yellowed and soft. A child's drawing. 2 stick girls on a carousel horse, one labelled E, one S. Beneath, in crayon, "Forever." "Found it in her locket," Crow said. "After Isabel. After. She kept it all these years." Poirot took the drawing, studied it. "You were childhood sweethearts. She promised you the pier when you were 10. Promises made on painted horses are binding, n'est-ce pas?" Crow's eyes filled. "I waited 30 years." Hastings shifted, uncomfortable. "Dash it, Poirot. He's a killer." "Non." Poirot stood. "He is a fool. He gave Isabel the shears, the oil, the strength, but he did not guide the blade. Someone else did." He turned to the skeleton on the track, a grinning ghoul with one eye missing. Its jaw had been wired to drop on cue. Poirot lifted the jaw. Inside the hollow skull, a third tape, smaller than the last, wrapped in oilskin. Jap swore. "How many of these blasted things are there?" Poirot carried it to the portable player Crow kept for testing sound effects. The reel spun, Crow's voice raw. "She's dead, madame. You said it'd be clean." Madame Vale, calm as frost. "Clean is for laundry, Silas. Stand on the crate. Hold her head. Isabel, strike now. Left to right. Good girl." A wet sound. Then Vale again. "Spin the carousel. Let the horses see." The tape ended with the waltz starting up, distant and tinny. Silence crashed down. Crow stared at the player as if it had grown teeth. "She used me," he said finally. "Used all of us." Poirot nodded. Madame Vale forged Isabel's release. She convinced Whitmore the sisters would share the inheritance if Evelyn died. She promised you the pier. She gave Isabel the shears and the rage. She stood on her spirit crate and directed the murder like a play. He produced the sodden crate label, now dry and cracked. "The tide returned her stage prop. The sea keeps its own accounts." Japp scratched his head. "But Vale's in a cell. How'd she plant the tapes?" "She didn't," Poirot said. "You did, Mr. Crow, at her instruction. You returned at dawn, moved the marble, hid the tapes. You thought you were tying up loose ends. You were tying the noose." Crow lunged, suddenly wildly, at the skeleton. The constable tackled him, but not before Crow wrenched the ghoul's arm free. Inside the hollow limb, a fourth marble, green and gold, cracked down the middle. "Last one!" Crow gasped, face in the sawdust. "She said burn it. I couldn't." Poirot picked up the broken marble. Inside the crack, a sliver of paper. "If found, give to HP. The pier is yours. E." He read it aloud. Crow began to sob, great wrenching sounds that shook his whole frame. "She left it for me," he choked, "even after everything. Said I'd earned it." Poirot's voice was gentle. "She left it for justice. She knew you'd return. She knew you'd break." He turned to Japp. "Take him, but treat him kindly. He is the pier's last mechanic. Without him, the ghosts would never have spoken." As Crow was led away, Poirot lingered among the skeletons. He adjusted the ghoul's jaw so it hung open in a silent scream. "The mechanic's revenge," he murmured, "was to keep the machine running. But the machine always wins." Outside, the carousel gave one final shudder, then fell still. The painted horses lowered their heads, as if bowing to the inevitable. Poirot pocketed the broken marble. Somewhere in the funhouse, a mirror cracked, spontaneously, cleanly, down the middle. The pier had delivered its final confession. Chapter 8. The Mirror's Lie. The funhouse had never been fun. Even in daylight it stank of damp canvas and despair, its corridors a warren of warped mirrors and painted devils. Now, with dusk bleeding through the cracked skylight, the place felt like a mausoleum for laughter. Poirot moved ahead of the others, lantern raised, his reflection splintering into a dozen distorted Poirots, each more grotesque than the last. Hastings followed, revolver drawn. "Place gives me the creeps. Every shadow looks like Isabel." "Précisément," Poirot murmured. The mirrors were her sanctuary. Here she could be Evelyn or no one at all. They passed a panel of convex glass that turned Hastings into a giant with a pinhead. In the next, Poirot became a squat goblin. Between the distortions, something moved, a flash of emerald silk. "Isabel!" Japp barked, swinging his torch. The beam caught only dust motes. But the mirrors lied. Poirot knew that now. He stopped before a full-length glass framed in chipped gilt. The reflection showed the corridor behind him, empty. Yet, in the glass, a woman stood at his shoulder, hand raised as if to touch his hat. Poirot did not turn. "Bonjour, Madame Val." The reflection smiled. Madame Vale's voice issued from a concealed gramophone horn hidden in the frame. "Clever little man, you found my looking-glasses." Japp swore and kicked the wall. The horn crackled, then fell silent. Poirot traced the frame with a gloved finger. "You built this maze yourself, n'est-ce pas? False panels, speaking tubes, mirrors that open like doors. A stage for your greatest illusion. 2 sisters, 1 murder." He pressed a hidden catch. The mirror swung inward on silent hinges, revealing a narrow chamber no larger than a confessional. Inside, a spirit cabinet painted gold, a reel-to-reel recorder, a child's dress, emerald silk, blood-stained. On the wall, photographs pinned like butterflies. Evelyn at parties, Isabel in Bedlam, both faces scratched out with a scalpel. Hastings whistled. "She's been living here. Directing from the wings," Poirot corrected. He lifted a photograph. Madame Val, younger, arm, around a teenage Evelyn. On the back, in Vale's spidery hand, "My perfect puppet." Japp examined the recorder. "Another tape?" Poirot threaded it. Vale's voice, calm as communion wine. "Silas will launch the boat. Marcus will drug them both. Isabel will strike. I will stand on the crate and guide the blade. The mirrors will watch. The pier will remember. And when they hang the madwoman, I will inherit everything: pier, fortune, freedom." The tape ended with the sound of a match striking. Then Vale laughing, low, triumphant. Poirot's face was stone. She planned it for years. Forged the release, groomed Isabel's rage, promised Crow the pier, seduced Whitmore with inheritance. The séance parlour was her rehearsal room, the fun house her theatre. He stepped into the chamber. On a small table, the missing pearl earring, cleaned of blood, and a 5th marble, perfect, uncracked, engraved MV. "The master marble," Poirot said. "She kept the set complete." A soft click behind them. The mirror door began to close. "Trap!" Hastings shouted, throwing his weight against it. The panel shuddered, but held, bolted from the outside. Japp pounded. "Open up, you witch!" From the corridor, Vale's voice lived now through another horn. "The tide's coming in, gentlemen. The pier will flood at 8. By then, my boat will be gone, and the fun house will be your tomb." Poirot remained calm. "Observe the mirrors. They are not all glass." He tapped the wall. It sounded hollow. "False backs. Madame Vale escapes while we drown in reflections." He found a seam, pried with his penknife. A panel swung open onto a service corridor barely wide enough for a child. They squeezed through, emerging behind the ghost train shed. Vale was already at the pier's edge, a valise in one hand, dinghy rope in the other. The emerald dress fluttered like a flag of surrender. "Stop!" Japp roared. Vale turned, smiling. "Too late, Inspector. The will names me sole heir if both sisters die without issue. Isabel's hanging will seal it." Poirot stepped forward. "No. The will was altered last week. Evelyn suspected you. She left everything to the Seamen's Orphanage, except the pier. That goes to Silas Crow, on condition he keeps it running for the town." Vale's smile faltered. "Liar." Poirot produced a document from his breast pocket. Evelyn's revised will, witnessed by the Pier Hotel solicitor. "Delivered to me this morning. You killed for nothing." Vale's eyes darted to the dinghy. The tide lapped hungrily at the pilings. "You used the mirrors to become Evelyn," Poirot continued. "You wore her dress, her perfume, her voice on tape. You stood in the funhouse door at dawn, beckoning us deeper into your maze. But mirrors reflect truth as well as lies. And the truth is this: you are 5'2". You needed the crate. You needed Crow. You needed Isabel. Alone, you were nothing." Vale dropped the valise. From her sleeve slid a derringer. Small, pearl-handled, deadly. Hastings raised his revolver. "Drop it!" Vale's laugh was brittle. "1 bullet. 3 men. The odds are mine." Poirot stepped between them. "No, the odds are the pier's." He gestured to the water. "The tide has turned. Your boat is grounded." The dinghy lay on its side, hull cracked by barnacles. The sea had claimed it. Vale's arm trembled. Then, with a cry, she turned the derringer on herself. The shot echoed like a funhouse scream. When the constables reached her, Madame Lysandre Vale was smiling, eyes open, reflecting the sky's last light. In her dead hand, the fifth marble rolled free and fell through the boards into the sea. Poirot watched it vanish. "The mirror's lie is broken," he said softly. "The pier is free." Behind them, the funhouse mirrors cracked in sequence, spontaneous, clean, final. One by one, the reflections died. The carousel gave a single weary creak, then stood silent forever. Chapter 9. The Sisters' Waltz. Twilight Pier lay bathed in the bruised violet of evening, the sky a vast mirror to the sea. The carousel stood at the heart of it all. Horses frozen mid-prance, canopy sagging like a funeral veil. Every suspect had been gathered on the platform. Captain Thorne, trembling with brandy and guilt. Dr. Whitmore, pale as the corpse he'd failed to save. Silas Crowe, wrists raw from cuffs, eyes fixed on the dappled mare. Inspector Japp, arms folded, face carved from granite. Hastings stood guard at the crank. Poirot took centre stage, the boards beneath his feet still faintly tacky with Evelyn's blood. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, voice carrying over the hush of the tide, "we have danced a long waltz of lies. 4 partners, 1 blade, 2 sisters. Tonight, the music ends." He produced the revised will, Evelyn's final testament, holding it aloft like a priest with scripture. Signed last week, witnessed, legal, the pier to Silas Crowe, the fortune to the Seamen's Orphanage, Madame Vale's inheritance. Psst, a mirage. Thorne muttered, "Then why kill Evelyn? Pourquoi?" Poirot turned to Crowe, because Monsieur Crowe believed love was a promise kept on painted horses. He placed the child's drawing, the crayon stick figures labelled E and S, into Crowe's cuffed hands. "You were 10, she was 9. You swore forever she broke it." Crowe's voice cracked. "She laughed when they sacked me. Said the pier needed refinement." Whitmore spoke, hoarse. "I forged Isabel's release to silence Evelyn's blackmail. I thought one mad woman could be controlled." Poirot's gaze pinned him. "You drug them both. 4 grains each. Evelyn to sleep, Isabel to strike. But you stood in the funhouse shadows, watching through mirrors." He turned to the empty space where Madame Val would have stood. "And you, Madame, were the conductor. You forged the release papers. You promised Crowe the pier, Whitmore the fortune, Isabel revenge. You stood on your spirit crate and guided the shears, left to right, perfect arc." Japp growled, "She's dead, Poirot. Shot herself not an hour ago." "Oui," Poirot's eyes gleamed. "But the dead still dance." He moved to the swan boat, lifted the carved wing. Inside the hollow, a final tape, no larger than a matchbox, labelled in violet ink, "The Sisters' Waltz Finale." Hastings threaded the portable player, the reel spun. Evelyn's voice, drugged, dreamy. "Isabel, you came back." Isabel, childlike. "You locked me away, said I was broken." A pause. Then Madame Vale, live, through the funhouse horn. "Strike now, child, for both of us." The wet sound of shears. Evelyn's gasp. Then Isabel singing softly, "Round and round the carousel." The tape ended with the carousel starting up. Slow, deliberate, the waltz beginning. Poirot stopped the machine. Madame Vale recorded everything. She wanted the pier to remember. She wanted us to remember. He faced the suspects. "Captain Thorne, you tied the bowline, launched the dinghy. You thought you were helping Evelyn escape a mad sister. You were wrong." Thorne's tremor worsened. I loved her. Dr. Whitmore, you supplied the laudanum, the theatre alibi, the forged papers. You thought you were saving your career. You were wrong. Whitmore's head bowed. Silas Crowe, you carried the body, stood on the crate, wound the carousel. You thought you were keeping a childhood promise. You were wrong. Crowe clutched the crayon drawing to his chest. Poirot stepped to the crank. And Madame Vale, she thought she could orchestrate murder and inherit a kingdom. She was wrong. He pulled the crank. The carousel groaned to life, slow, reluctant. The painted horses rose and fell. The dappled mare passed first, then the swan boat, then the black stallion with its gouged leg. As the platform turned, something glinted in the swan's beak. The missing pearl earring returned. The waltz played, tinny, mournful, eternal. Poirot raised his voice over the music. The sisters danced together one last time. Evelyn drugged, Isabel mad, Vale directing from the mirrors, but the pier kept the truth. The carousel completed one revolution. Then, with a shudder, the mechanism seized, a final clunk. Silence. Poirot stopped the crank. The waltz is over. He turned to Japp. Arrest them all. Accessory, conspiracy, murder. The courts will sort the steps. As the constables moved in, Crowe looked up, eyes wet. The pier, it's mine. Oui. Poirot placed the revised will in his hands. Keep it running, for the children, for the promise. Thorne was led away muttering about tides. Whitmore stared at the blood-stained boards as if seeing ghosts. Crowe stood motionless, the crayon drawing fluttering in the wind. Poirot lingered as the others left. He adjusted the swan, boat's wing, closing it gently over the empty hollow. From the funhouse came a sound, soft, almost imaginary. Two little girls laughing, round and round. Poirot smiled into the dusk. Dansez, mes petites, the pier remembers. The carousel horses lowered their heads as if in curtsy. The tide rolled in, gentle and forgiving, washing the last of the lies into the sea. The sisters' waltz was done. Chapter 10. The final turn. The pier was empty now, save for the gulls and the tide. Lanterns had been doused. The funhouse mirrors hung in shards like broken promises. Only the carousel remained, its painted horses gleaming under a moon that turned the sea to polished pewter. Hercule Poirot stood alone at the platform's edge, hands clasped behind his back, watching the water lap at the barnacled pilings. The blood was gone, washed clean by the night tide, but the boards still seemed to remember. Footsteps sounded behind him, deliberate, unhurried. Inspector Japp approached, cap in hand, the weight of the day etched into every line of his face. "They're all in cells," he said. "Thorne's babbling about knots. Whitmore's asked for a priest. Crowe won't speak, just stares at that crayon drawing. And Vale," Japp shrugged. "Morg's got her. Bullet straight through the palate. No note." Poirot did not turn. A note was unnecessary. Madame Vale's entire life was a performance. The final act required no explanation, only applause. He stepped onto the carousel, shoes clicking on the worn planks. The dappled mare regarded him with one painted eye. The swan boat's wing still closed like a secret. Poirot ran a gloved finger along the brass pole, collecting a trace of oil and salt. "The pier has confessed everything," he murmured. "The tapes, the marbles, the mirrors, the blood. Every gear turned in perfect order. Yet one question remains." Japp frowned. "We've got the killers. What's left?" Poirot faced him. "Pourquoi maintenant? Why did Evelyn change her will 1 week ago? Why provoke the conspiracy into action?" He produced the revised will from his breast pocket, unfolding it with care. The ink was fresh. the solicitor's seal still crisp. She knew they were closing in. Vale's séances had grown too accurate, details only an intimate could know. Whitmore's prescriptions had doubled. Crow's dismissal was the final betrayal, and Isabel's escape. Evelyn orchestrated it. Japp's jaw dropped. She wanted to die? No. Poirot's voice was soft. She wanted justice. She lured the monster into the light, then stepped aside. The orphanage inherits the fortune. The pier goes to Crow, on condition he keeps it running for the town. Every penny Vale coveted, every promise broken, redirected to the innocent. He moved to the crank, resting a hand on the lever. Evelyn Harrow was not the victim. She was the conductor. The Sisters' Waltz was her composition. Japp scratched his head. Then why the elaborate murder? Why not just expose them? Because exposure would have ruined lives without mending them. Poirot pulled the crank gently. The carousel gave a weary sigh, but did not turn. She gave each conspirator what they most desired, then took it away. Thorne's loyalty became complicity. Whitmore's ambition became disgrace. Crow's childhood dream became a prison sentence. Vale's greed became a bullet. He released the lever. And Isabel, poor mad Isabel, was the instrument. Evelyn drugged herself to appear helpless, knowing her sister's rage would strike true. The throat wound was theatre. The real death was the laudanum, self-administered. Japp stared. Suicide by conspiracy. Précisément. Poirot stepped down from the platform. She left the tapes, the marbles, the clues, breadcrumbs for the little grey cells. She trusted I would see the pattern. He walked to the pier's edge, where the dinghy had once been tied. The cut chain dangled like a noose. The tide returns everything, he said. Secrets, sins, truths. Tonight it returned justice. Japp followed, voice gruff. And Crow? He'll hang with the rest. No. Poirot turned, eyes bright in the moonlight. Crow will serve 10 years, for accessory, for love. Then he will return here. The will stipulates it. He will oil the gears, paint the horses, keep the carousel turning for the children. His punishment is to live the promise he killed for. Japp considered this, then nodded slowly. Fitting. Poirot looked back at the carousel. The painted horses seemed almost alive in the silver light, heads high, manes flowing. One final detail, he said. He reached into his pocket and drew out the 5th marble, the perfect one engraved MV, retrieved from Vale's dead hand. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed it into the sea. It arced, glinted, vanished without a sound. The set is broken, he said. The game is over. A breeze stirred, carrying the faint strains of Valse Bleue, not from the carousel, but from the pier itself, as if the iron bones remembered the tune. The horses rose and fell once, gently, though no hand touched the crank. Japp shivered. Dash it, Poirot. You'll have me believing in ghosts. Poirot smiled. No, mon ami. Only in justice, and in promises kept. He tipped his hat to the carousel, to the sea, to the night. Then, with Hastings falling into step beside him, he walked the length of Twilight Pier for the last time. Behind them, the painted horses lowered their heads in silent salute. The fog rolled in, thick and merciful, swallowing the lights of the Pier Hotel. When it cleared at dawn, the carousel stood empty, the bloodstains gone, the mirrors blind. Only the tide remained, whispering, eternal, carrying the sisters' waltz into the deep.